This is BBC One, and with the latest news, here's Michael Burke.
A huge bomb's been found just south of the Irish border. Police say Republicans plan to use it in Northern Ireland as the peace talks start again. The Health Secretary's warned the NHS bosses cut the waiting lists or else. And England roll over the Scots to close in on the Triple Crown. Good evening. Police in the Irish Republic have found the components of a huge car bomb they think was going to be used in Northern Ireland. It consisted of more than half a tonne of explosives and was found in a garage at Dundalk in County Louth. 2 men have been arrested. The bomb was found as the political parties were getting ready to resume the Northern Ireland peace talks tomorrow.
It was a massive bomb, 1,300 pounds of explosives, which were in the final stages of preparation. The Irish police had been keeping watch overnight on the shed where the bomb was stored. They think it was destined for Northern Ireland.
One can only conclude that if this device had been used, that it would cause massive destruction. As regards where the device would have been used, one must only conclude, due to the proximity to the border here, that it was to be used outside the jurisdiction.
It's the second large car bomb to be found near Dundalk in the past month. The Irish police said the last one appeared to have been made by the Republican fringe group, the Continuity IRA. But they're not speculating about who was responsible for this one. The planned bombing has been condemned by senior figures from both sides of the community.
Most people in Northern Ireland will be pleased that this bomb was intercepted before it could be exploded. Thankful also that massive destruction and indeed loss of life has been prevented. And now our thoughts will turn as to who exactly is responsible for this bomb, what element of the Republican movement was behind this latest incident.
Clearly, Sinn Féin's position is that all those who are presently engaged in any form of armed activity would be better actually coming behind those who are trying to build a viable peace process.
Mitchell McLaughlin was speaking at a nationalist rally in Portadown, which was a protest at the lack of any decision by government so far to ban any Protestant marches in future from Catholic areas of the town. Although it was an early reminder that the summer marches issue hasn't gone away, the protest passed off peacefully. Protestant counter-demonstrators were kept well back by police, and there was no trouble. Such positive outcomes are rare here and may bring a little encouragement to those involved in the peace talks, which will resume here at Stormont in the morning. At the start of the new session, Sinn Féin will be rejoining the process. Joe Paley, BBC News at Stormont.
The Health Secretary Frank Dobson is warning NHS bosses that they could lose their jobs if they fail to cut hospital waiting lists. Waiting lists have risen since the government came to power, despite Labour's promise to bring them down. Mr Dobson wants the numbers cut by 100,000 in the next year. He'll meet senior members of NHS trusts and health authorities this week to discuss the issue.
Hospital waiting lists are now at record levels, and the extra £500 million allocated in last week's budget is aimed at cutting the backlog of an additional 100,000 cases since the general election. Health Service chiefs have been warned that in the end their jobs could be on the line unless the waiting lists are reduced.
I'm getting the chairs and chief executives of all the outfits involved in to see me, and there's a lot of them, there are hundreds of them, and I'm going to say, you've got to do it. And I will have to say, if you fail to do it, we'll have to get other people to come in and give you advice and give you help, but it's got to be delivered.
Not only are hospitals having to cope with bigger waiting lists, but for many patients it's much longer before they're seen, with hundreds said to be approaching an 18-month wait. Health managers say that's just as worrying.
Even with that extra £500 million, we're still short of the amount of money that we need to run the NHS each year. And what we don't want to see is the pressure being put so greatly onto waiting lists that we skew other priorities that are just as vital for the health service.
Shouting at managers is no substitute for real increases, at least 3% real growth per year, to pay the doctors and the nurses who will bring the waiting list down.
Bring down the curtain.
Labour fought the election promising to make health a priority, a pledge they're now being reminded of.
You couldn't drive 5 yards during the last general election without seeing an enormous hoarding, saying quite clearly, waiting lists will be shorter. And now they're telling us it's going to take them a whole year before they even so much as get back to the situation that they inherited from us. That is a categorical failure to deliver.
So far, Frank Dobson's tactic has been to say sorry and promise to do better. But the government are left with a much tighter timetable to honour an election pledge, which Labour had previously been confident of delivering. Nicholas Jones, BBC News at the Health Department.
The team investigating allegations of brutality at Wormwood Scrubs prison in West London has removed documents from the jail. 8 inmates at Wormwood Scrubs have accused prison officers of serious assaults. Yesterday, 2 of the prisoners were moved from the jail at their own request after claims that witnesses were being intimidated. The 2 Newcastle United directors who insulted local women and mocked the club's supporters and a star player are coming under increasing pressure to resign. The chairman of the club's parent board, Sir Terence Harrison, and 2 other non-executive directors may resign themselves if the 2 won't go.
Another bout of newspaper allegations did little to relieve the gloom of Newcastle supporters today. Still less were they impressed by news that controversial chairman Freddie Shepherd had been photographed in Barbados yesterday. A former club director thought Shepherd and Hall should resign.
I think these 2 chaps, even though they own 60% of the club, should take a back seat. Even if they stay as directors, they should resign as chairman and vice chairman.
Vice-Chairman Douglas Hall has signalled his determination not to go, but both he and Freddie Shepherd are under intense pressure from the board of the parent company. Sir Terence Harrison, who chairs the PLC, told the BBC this morning that he and the 2 other non-executive directors were considering their position. Sir Terence told the BBC today that he thought the outcome of this affair would be a departure from the company by someone. Most fans say it should be Messrs Hall and Shepherd.
Well, I think we ought to go, really. I really do. And I think, first of all, we've got to get behind the team. I think that's vital to do that. How we're going to combine the 2, I'm not quite sure.
Quite frankly, I think what's been happening at St James's Park is an absolute disgrace. The directors are talking about the sting from the News of the World. I think these directors have stung the whole of the North East.
The original purpose of tomorrow's board meeting was to finalise the half-yearly financial results. The controversy over Freddie Shepherd and Douglas Hall has added an unwelcome extra item of business to the agenda. But Sir Terence Harrison says, one way or another, he expects the matter to be resolved by Tuesday morning. Mike Mackay, BBC News, Newcastle.
Pope John Paul has told Nigeria's military regime that there's no place for abuse of power or intimidation of the poor and the weak. On the second day of his visit to the country, the Pope travelled to the southern town of Onitsha to beatify a local monk at an open-air mass before hundreds of thousands of people.
There was a frantic rush to greet the Pope, the scene a blend of chaos and euphoria. This was a day of heat, dust and intense devotion. The Pope had come to the Catholic heart of Nigeria with a message his people were hungry to hear. For believers, it was a time for celebration. Not even the heavy hand of the security forces could spoil it. On the altar, the Pope beatified a Nigerian monk, Father Michael Tansey. In time, he's expected to become the country's first saint. There was colour and pageantry and music from elephant tusks. This was a very African occasion. The mood was festive, but the message was serious. The Pope applied more pressure to Nigeria's military leadership, calling again for human rights to be respected and for honesty in government.
There can be no place for the misuse of authority or the abuse of power.
From the mass of bodies stretching as far as the eye could see, the response was spontaneous applause. The Pope has overcome age, frail health and soaring temperatures to bring his message here. And for Nigeria's Roman Catholics, there's no doubting the power of the occasion. But his words aren't only for the faithful, they're also aimed at the country's military regime. What impact he may have there is less certain. No one here expects immediate results, least of all Pope John Paul. But today he brought hope to a corner of this troubled country. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Onitsha.
England have kept the Calcutta Cup after beating Scotland by 34 points to 20. It was a record-breaking score at Murrayfield and leaves England in a strong position to retain the Triple Crown when Ireland visit Twickenham in a fortnight's time.
Scotland have not beaten England in the past 8 encounters, and they're recovering from heavy defeats at the hands of France and South Africa. But it was first blood to the English boot of Paul Grayson. More kicked points followed and the teams changed over at half-time, level 6-all. England started to take up residence under the Scottish posts, and after 3 collapsed scrums were awarded a penalty try. This was the start of English dominance, particularly in the pack, and it was the scrum which set up this try for Matt Dawson, who wriggled through under the posts. 5 minutes later, a feature of the match, a succession of basic Scottish handling errors, presented Austin Healey with the ball at his feet to dribble on and score. 25 points to 6.
Once again, Grayson through.
No one has any doubts about Paul Grayson's value as a kicker for England, but he surely dispelled claims that he's sluggish with this brilliant individual effort. The match won, England took their foot off the throttle and Scotland came storming back with 2 tries in injury time to restore a modicum of respectability. The first following a brilliant handling move involving half the Scottish team, and a record 24th try for Tony Stanger. But an emphatic defeat, 20 points to 34. Adam Minot, BBC News.
The West Indies have taken complete control of the final test against England on the 3rd day in Antigua. They passed England's first innings total of 127 without losing a wicket. The opener, Clayton Lambert, was the most successful batsman of the day. He made his maiden century in just under 6 hours at the crease. A short while ago, the West Indies were 419 for 4. A sapphire and diamond necklace has been sold for more than $2 million at an auction in Los Angeles for the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund. Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, was guest of honour at the event.
Stars, sequins and limousines, the famous and the not-so-famous turned out for the charity night, and among them, a face not yet accustomed to the limelight, Paul Burrell, the Princess's former butler, now manager of her memorial fund. It was all laid on in customary Hollywood style. Tickets started at $500 a head, giving well-heeled guests the chance to bid for memorabilia associated with the late princess.
The princess was above class. She had the ability to be at ease equally with heads of state as with people on the street. People were her priority. People mattered most.
Good gracious.
Perhaps as a reminder of my feelings for you.
Is it a
diamond? Yes.
This year's blockbuster, Titanic, provided the theme. The necklace, worn in the film by British Oscar nominee Kate Winslet, was a creation of the props department.
Let's say $1 million to start.
But here was the real thing, recreated by Royal Jewellers Asprey, specially to be auctioned at the Hollywood Bowl.
$2 million too.
Jewellers say it's worth more. The anonymous buyer, it seems, got a bargain. Chris West, BBC News.
The main news again tonight, a huge bomb has been found in the Irish Republic. That's all from the BBC Newsroom this weekend. Good night.
Good evening to you. It'll be all change in a few days' time, but not so at the moment. We still have the high pressure with us and still the same old problem, and that is the cloud. Will it break or won't it? We've had some good breaks earlier on in the day, but you can see the way the cloud has begun to filter in from the east. Those breaks are heading westwards. So it is going to be that southwestern corner that's most likely to stay in the clear tonight. Thicker cloud bringing a few spots of rain onto parts of East Anglia in the southeast, as well as into the far northwest of Scotland. But in that southwestern corner and into parts of the Midlands, that's where there'll be a ground frost, and there could even be a touch of air frost. And that's where the brightest weather first thing tomorrow is going to be. In these more western parts of both England and Wales, some sunshine there. Thicker cloud with some drizzle in the northwest of Scotland and in the extreme southeast of England. And that thicker cloud is going to ease westwards during the course of the day. The thicker cloud in the north easing eastwards, bringing outbreaks of rain into a good part of Northern Ireland and Scotland before the day's out. Most of it light and patchy. Some heavier bursts, though, in Highland region and the Western Isles. We're also going to find the sunshine going in those western areas, perhaps holding on in the far southwest and in the Channel Islands. After a chilly start, temperatures eventually climbing up to around about 10 or 11 degrees. The next few days, though, much less settled weather, southeast staying bright, but many other parts having some outbreaks of rain. A very good evening.